The sunset painted Westbrook Stables in hues of amber and gold, as 16-year-old Sophie Chen guided her wheelchair toward the forbidden paddock. Everyone said the untameable stallion would kill the girl in the wheelchair, the same girl who hadn't spoken a word since the accident that took her voice and her legs 2 years ago. But on this fateful autumn evening, as Sophie's determined eyes met those of the dangerous black stallion named Phantom. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Everything was about to change in ways that would shock their entire community. The crisp October air carried the familiar scent of hay and leather across the family-owned stable grounds, mixing with the earthy aroma of fresh wood shavings from the newly renovated barn. Sophie's practiced hands moved her wheelchair smoothly across the packed gravel path, her movements precise despite the uneven terrain. Her grandmother's jade pendant bounced gently against her chest with each push forward, the only piece of her Chinese heritage she had left after the fire. "Sophie, get back from there right now." David Marshall's voice cut through the evening air like a knife. The stable owner, a former Olympic equestrian whose career ended after a jumping accident, rushed toward her with surprising speed for a man with a prosthetic leg. His salt and pepper hair was disheveled from the day's work, and worry lines creased his weathered face. "That horse is nothing but trouble. He nearly killed Marcus yesterday." Sophie's hands remained steady on her wheels as she pulled out her tablet, typing quickly with practiced efficiency. The text-to-speech function activated. Marcus tried to force him. That's why Phantom fought back. He's scared, not dangerous. Her synthetic voice carried an odd conviction that made David pause. In the paddock behind them, Phantom paced restlessly. Standing 17 hands high, the jet-black Frisian stallion was a sight to behold. His muscled form rippled with each movement, power contained within a frame that seemed too magnificent to be real. 3 professional trainers had already quit, 2 with serious injuries. The local authorities were pushing to have him euthanized after he broke through 3 reinforced fences in 1 week. But Sophie saw something in those wild eyes that others missed. Perhaps it was because she recognized that same look of trapped panic from her own reflection in the hospital window after the house fire that changed everything. The accident that took her parents, her voice, and her ability to walk had left her with an understanding of trauma that went beyond words. David ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Sophie had come to recognize as his internal struggle between caution and compassion. "Sophie, honey, I promised your Aunt May I'd keep you safe when she entrusted you to my care. This horse. He's different from the therapy horses you've worked with. He's wild, dangerous." Sophie's fingers flew across her tablet again. "So, was I after the accident, remember? You were the only one who didn't give up on me then. Give me a chance with him. Please." The words hung in the air between them as Phantom suddenly stopped his pacing. The stallion's ears, usually pinned back in aggression, swiveled forward with interest. He moved closer to the fence, his nostrils flaring as he caught Sophie's scent on the breeze. David watched the interaction with a mixture of fear and fascination. In the 15 years he'd run Westbrook Stables' therapeutic riding program, he'd never seen anything quite like this. The girl who hadn't spoken a word in 2 years, trying to reach the horse everyone had deemed unreachable. 2 weeks, Sophie's device spoke as her fingers typed. "The fall festival is in 2 weeks. Let me try until then. If I can't make progress, I'll never ask about him again." David looked from Sophie to Phantom, who had drawn even closer to the fence, his previous agitation seemingly forgotten. The stallion's eyes, dark as midnight, were fixed on Sophie with an intensity that should have been frightening. Instead, there was something almost searching in his gaze. "1 week, David countered, his voice firm but gentle. "And you don't go near that fence without me or Lisa present. At the first sign of real danger, we pull the plug. No arguments." Sophie's face broke into a rare smile, the kind that reached her eyes and reminded David of the bright, talkative girl she'd been before the tragedy. She nodded emphatically, already typing on her tablet. "Deal. We start tomorrow at dawn." As David helped Sophie navigate her wheelchair back toward the main stable, neither of them noticed how Phantom's gaze followed their every move, or how his ears remained forward, tracking the sound of their departure. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the mountains now, casting long shadows across the paddock. But something extraordinary had begun, something that would not only change their lives, but would touch the hearts of everyone in their small town of Cedar Grove, Virginia, and beyond. Dawn broke over Cedar Grove with a symphony of pink and lavender streaks painting the Virginia sky. Sophie was already at Westbrook Stables, having convinced her Aunt May to drop her off before heading to her nursing shift. The morning air was crisp with the first hint of frost, and Sophie's breath created small clouds as she positioned her wheelchair near Phantom's paddock. Lisa Martinez, the head trainer, watched from the supply room doorway as Sophie pulled something unexpected from her backpack, not treats or training equipment, but a small electronic keyboard. "That's your grand plan?" Lisa called out, her tone a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "Playing music for him?" Sophie's fingers moved across him, her tablet with practiced precision. Music speaks when words can't. The artificial voice carried across the morning stillness as she set up the keyboard on the portable tray attached to her wheelchair. David emerged from the barn, carrying his morning coffee. He paused mid-sip when he saw the keyboard. "Sophie, honey, I'm not sure." But before he could finish, Sophie's fingers touched the keys, and the first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune floated through the air. Phantom, who had been pacing his usual agitated path along the fence line, stopped abruptly. His ears swiveled forward, nostrils flaring as he processed this new development. Sophie kept playing, her eyes closed, swaying slightly with the melody. The piece had been her mother's favorite, and she'd spent countless hours practicing it before the fire. "Well, I'll be damned," Lisa whispered as Phantom gradually moved closer to the fence, his previous aggression replaced by what appeared to be curiosity. The stallion's head bobbed slightly in time with the music, his powerful frame becoming less tense with each note. When the piece ended, Sophie opened her eyes to find Phantom standing just a few feet from the fence, watching her intently. She began another piece, this time Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The horse's response was immediate. He took another step closer. "It's working because it's not demanding anything from him," David mused, keeping his voice low. "No pressure, no expectations, just presence." For 3 hours, Sophie played her repertoire of classical pieces, occasionally mixing in some contemporary songs her mother had taught her. Phantom remained near the fence, sometimes pacing slowly, but always returning to listen. Other stable hands gathered at a distance, watching in amazement as the notorious stallion showed a side of himself no one had seen before. When Sophie finally packed up her keyboard, her arms tired from playing, Phantom nickered softly, his first non-aggressive vocalization since arriving at Westbrook. Sophie's tablet spoke. "Same time tomorrow, beautiful boy. I promise." That evening, as David drove Sophie home to her aunt's house, he couldn't help but ask, "Why music?" Sophie typed thoughtfully, "After the fire, when I couldn't speak and everything hurt too much, music was the only thing that made sense. It doesn't judge, doesn't demand, it just exists with you in the pain." David gripped the steering wheel tighter, remembering those dark days after Sophie had come to live with her aunt in Cedar Grove. The once vibrant girl had retreated, so far into herself that doctors feared she might never emerge. It was only after discovering the stable's therapy program that she began to show signs of healing. "You know," he said carefully, "most people would be terrified of Phantom after what happened to Marcus." Sophie's response was quick. "Most people look at me in my wheelchair and see someone broken. They're wrong about me and they're wrong about Phantom." The next morning, Sophie arrived with not only her keyboard but also a small speaker. David raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Different genres," her device explained. "Horses respond to different rhythms. I researched it last night." As the sun climbed higher, Sophie experimented with everything from classical to soft jazz, carefully observing Phantom's reactions to each style. The stallion showed a particular interest in piano pieces, moving closer to the fence whenever Sophie played them live, rather than through the speaker. Word of Sophie's unusual approach began to spread through Cedar Grove. Sarah Bennett, the local veterinarian, stopped by to observe. "I've never seen anything quite like this," she admitted to David. That horse attacked everyone who came near him, but look. She gestured to where Phantom stood calmly by the fence, his eyes half closed as Sophie played Chopin. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She sees something in him that we don't, David replied, watching as Sophie's fingers danced across the keys. Maybe she understands him better than we ever could. By the end of the second day, Phantom had established a pattern of standing directly beside the section of fence closest to Sophie's wheelchair whenever she played. His previously constant agitation had been replaced by an almost peaceful demeanor, at least while the music played. As the sun set on day 2 of their unusual partnership, Sophie typed out a message to David. "Tomorrow I want to try something." "You." David looked at her warily. "Sophie." Her artificial voice cut through his concern. "Trust goes both ways. Sometimes you have to give it to receive it." Little did anyone know that Sophie's next step would challenge everything they thought they knew about trust, healing, and the extraordinary bond between a silent girl and a wild horse. The third morning dawned with an unexpected challenge. Dark clouds loomed over Cedar Grove, threatening rain. Most of the stable hands expected Sophie to postpone her session with Phantom, but she arrived right on schedule, her determination evident in the set of her jaw. This time, she carried not only her keyboard but also a waterproof tarp to protect it. "Sophie, maybe we should wait," David suggested, eyeing the threatening sky. "Storms make horses nervous and Phantom's already unpredictable enough." Sophie's response through her tablet was immediate. "That's exactly why I need to be here. He needs to know I won't abandon him when things get difficult." Lisa helped Sophie set up her equipment under a small portable canopy they'd erected near the fence. Phantom watched from his shelter, more agitated than he'd been the previous days. His hooves drummed against the ground, creating hollow thuds that echoed his unease. The first droplets of rain began to fall as Sophie started to play. She chose Beethoven's Für Elise, its gentle notes barely audible over the increasing patter of rain. Phantom's pacing became more frantic, his powerful body tense with nervous energy. Then came the thunder. The boom echoed across the valley, and Phantom reared, letting out a terrified whinny that made everyone jump. His hooves sliced through the air as he landed, eyes rolling with fear. David started forward, ready to pull Sophie away from the fence, but she held up her hand to stop him. Instead of retreating, Sophie's fingers found new keys. The melody that flowed from her keyboard was something original, a piece she'd composed during her own sleepless nights after the fire. It started soft, almost hesitant, like raindrops on a window, then gradually built into something more powerful but soothing, matching the rhythm of the storm itself. Phantom's reaction was remarkable. His frantic movement slowed as he turned toward the music. Ears pricked forward despite another rumble of thunder. Sophie continued playing, her hair now soaked despite the canopy, her fingers never faltering on the keys. "Look at that," Lisa whispered to David, both of them sheltering beneath the barn overhang. "She's not just playing for him, she's playing with him." Indeed, Sophie had begun to incorporate Phantom's movements into her music. When he snorted, she added a deeper note. When he pawed the ground, she matched his rhythm. It was as if they were having a conversation that transcended traditional communication. Gradually, Phantom moved closer to the fence, drawn to the one calm presence in his world of chaos. His powerful body still trembled with each thunderclap, but his focus remained fixed on Sophie and her music. Then something extraordinary happened. As Sophie transitioned into a softer melody, Phantom stretched his neck over the fence, not in aggression but in curiosity. For the first time since his arrival at Westbrook, he voluntarily sought human contact. "Nobody move," David breathed, though the warning was unnecessary. Everyone present knew they were witnessing something remarkable. Sophie kept playing with one hand while slowly raising the other, palm up, toward Phantom's quivering muzzle. Time seemed to stand still as the wild stallion, who had sent 3 trainers to the hospital, gently touched his nose to her open palm. The moment was captured by Amy Rodriguez, a local high school student who'd been documenting the stable's activities for her photography class. The image would later become iconic. A rain-soaked girl in a wheelchair, one hand extended toward a massive black stallion, both seemingly oblivious to the storm raging around them, connected by something deeper than words could express. When the rain finally began to ease, Phantom didn't retreat. He remained by the fence, allowing Sophie to stroke his velvet nose while her other hand continued to play soft melodies. David and Lisa exchanged glances, both recognizing that they were watching the impossible become possible. It's because she doesn't see him as something to be fixed, Lisa realized aloud. She sees him as someone to be understood. As the clouds began to break, allowing thin streams of sunlight to pierce through, Sophie finally stopped playing. Her tablet spoke. "I want to try something else now." David approached carefully, not wanting to disturb the delicate peace that had been established. "What are you thinking?" Sophie's fingers flew across her tablet. "I want to go inside the paddock." "Absolutely not," David and Lisa said simultaneously. Sophie's response was calm but firm. "He's ready. I can feel it. And if we wait too long, we might lose this moment." "Sophie." David knelt beside her wheelchair, his voice gentle but serious. "I know you've made incredible progress, but this is too dangerous. He could kill you with one kick." Her artificial voice carried a quiet confidence. "He won't. Today proved something. He's not just responding to the music anymore. He's choosing to connect. Please, David, trust me like you did when you first let me near horses after the accident." David looked at Lisa, who shrugged helplessly. "It's your call, boss, but I've never seen anything like what we just witnessed. Maybe she's right." As if understanding he was the subject of discussion, Phantom nickered softly, his head still lowered to Sophie's level. There was something almost gentle in his eyes now, a far cry from the wild creature who had arrived at Westbrook just weeks ago. David ran his hands through his hair, knowing he was about to make either the best or worst decision of his career. "We do this my way," he finally said, with every possible precaution. Sophie's smile lit up her face as she typed, "Thank you. He's ready, and so am I." Little did they know that their next step would not only challenge everything they thought. They knew about trust, but would also set in motion a series of events that would change lives far beyond the fences of Westbrook Stables. The preparation for Sophie's first entry into Phantom's paddock took on the air of a military operation. David had called in additional staff, positioned emergency medical supplies nearby, and ensured every possible safety measure was in place. Even Dr. Bennett, the veterinarian, stood ready with a tranquilizer gun, though Sophie's tablet had firmly stated absolutely not when she saw it. "If we need that," her artificial voice had declared, "we've already failed." The morning. Sun cast long shadows across the paddock as David checked the gate's hinges for the third time. Lisa stood ready with a lead rope, though everyone present doubted it would be of much use if Phantom decided to charge. Sophie sat calmly in her wheelchair, her keyboard secured to its tray, watching the stallion with steady eyes. "Go through the plan one more time," David insisted, his prosthetic leg creaking slightly as he knelt beside her wheelchair. Sophie's fingers moved across her tablet with patient precision. "I'll enter with you and Lisa flanking me. We stop every few feet to let Phantom adjust. I'll play at each stop, keeping him focused on the music rather than our approach. If he shows any signs of aggression, we back out slowly. No sudden movements, no loud noises." What Sophie didn't type was her private conviction that none of these precautions would be necessary. She had seen something in Phantom's eyes during the storm, a recognition, a connection that went beyond conventional understanding. It was the same look she'd seen in her own reflection the day David had first suggested she try horse therapy, a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Ready?" David asked, his hand on the gate latch. Sophie nodded, her fingers already positioned on the keyboard. As the gate swung open with a subtle creak, she began to play the piece she'd composed during the storm. Phantom's ears immediately swiveled forward, his powerful body becoming still as the familiar melody filled the morning air. Their progress into the paddock was painfully slow. Every few feet, they would stop, allowing the music to create a bubble of calm around them. Phantom watched their approach with intense focus, his head held high but his ears remaining forward. A good sign, as Lisa whispered to David. Halfway across the paddock, something unexpected happened. Instead of waiting for them to approach, Phantom began walking toward Sophie. David tensed, ready to push her wheelchair backward, but Sophie's music never faltered. Her faith was rewarded when the stallion stopped a few feet away, bobbing his head slightly in time with the melody. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Bennett murmured from her position by the fence. She had lowered the tranquilizer gun, recognizing it was unnecessary. "It's like they're speaking their own language." Sophie transitioned into a softer piece, one she'd been working on specifically for this moment. Her tablet, balanced on her keyboard, displayed a message. "He's not just listening to the music anymore. He's listening to me." As if to prove her point, Phantom took another step forward, then another, until he stood directly beside her wheelchair. With extraordinary gentleness, he lowered his massive head to her eye level. Sophie's right hand continued playing while her left slowly rose to touch his cheek. The connection was electric. Everyone present felt it. A moment where two broken souls recognized each other and chose to heal together. Phantom's eyes, once wild with fear, softened as Sophie's gentle touch found the sweet spot behind his ear. "Keep recording, Lisa," whispered to Amy, who was capturing every moment with her camera. "This is history in the making." For nearly an hour, Sophie played one-handed, while maintaining physical contact with Phantom. The stallion remained beside her wheelchair, occasionally nibbling at her sleeve or gently nudging her shoulder, but never showing a hint of his former aggression. When she finally stopped playing, Sophie reached for her tablet. "I want to try something else." David, who had begun to relax slightly, immediately tensed again. "Sophie." "Not riding," her device spoke. "Not yet, but I want to show him something. Lisa, could you bring my backpack?" From the bag, Sophie withdrew a soft curry comb, one she'd been carrying with her everywhere for days, allowing it to absorb her scent. With slow, deliberate movements, she held it up for Phantom to inspect. The stallion's reaction surprised everyone. Instead of shying away from the grooming tool, he stretched his neck forward to sniff it thoroughly, then positioned his shoulder next to Sophie's wheelchair, a clear invitation. "He's asking to be groomed," Lisa said in amazement. "A horse that wouldn't let anyone touch him 3 days ago is asking for grooming." Sophie's smile was radiant as she began gentle circular motions with the curry comb. Phantom's eyes half closed, in pleasure, his lower lip drooping in relaxation. Every few strokes, she would pause to type one-handed on her tablet. "See? Trust builds trust." As the morning wore on, more stable hands gathered to watch the miraculous transformation taking place in their midst. The story of the silent girl who gentled the wild stallion with music began to spread through Cedar Grove, drawing curious onlookers who were asked to keep their distance, but couldn't help being moved by what they witnessed. "You know what this means, don't you?" Lisa said quietly to David as they watched Sophie methodically grooming Phantom's gleaming coat. "She's going to want to ride him." David nodded, already anticipating the challenge ahead. "And something tells me she won't take no for an answer." Sophie, overhearing their conversation, typed without pausing her grooming. "First, we dance. Then, we fly." The next phase of Sophie's journey with Phantom began with a surprising delivery to Westbrook Stables. A sleek black van pulled up early one morning, bearing the logo of AdaptTech Equestrian Solutions. Dr. James Wilson, a specialist in adaptive riding equipment, stepped out carrying detailed diagrams and prototype gear. "I've never designed anything quite like this before," Dr. Wilson admitted as he spread the blueprints across David's office desk. A fully customized riding system for someone with Sophie's specific needs, designed to work with a horse as powerful as your Phantom. It's unprecedented. Sophie sat in her wheelchair, studying the technical drawings with intense focus. Her tablet spoke. "The key is to give him freedom of movement while keeping me secure. Traditional adaptive equipment is too restrictive. He'll feel trapped." The design they'd been working on via video calls for the past few days was revolutionary. A specially modified saddle with stabilizing features that could be quickly released if necessary. combined with a unique harness system that would allow Sophie to use her upper body strength for balance while remaining safely positioned. The cost, David began, looking at the figures at the bottom of the order form, but Sophie was already shaking her head. Her fingers flew across her tablet. I'm using the insurance money from the fire. Mom and Dad would have wanted this. The mention of her parents brought a heavy silence to the room. It was the first time since the accident that Sophie had referenced them directly. David squeezed her shoulder gently, recognizing the significance of the moment. While Dr. Wilson began taking measurements of both Sophie and Phantom, the latter surprisingly cooperative as long as Sophie was nearby playing her keyboard, news of their progress had begun attracting attention beyond Cedar Grove. A reporter from the regional newspaper arrived to cover the story, though she was asked to observe from a distance. It's remarkable, the reporter commented to Lisa, watching Sophie guide Phantom through basic liberty work in the paddock. Without using any ropes or restraints, she was directing his movements purely through musical cues and subtle gestures. But surely you're not actually going to let her ride him. Lisa's response was diplomatic but firm. Sophie's not just training Phantom. They're developing their own language. Traditional rules don't apply here. The custom equipment arrived piece by piece over the next few days. Each new item was carefully introduced to Phantom through a ritual Sophie had developed. First, she would play with it nearby while he watched, then allow him to investigate it thoroughly, and finally demonstrate its use on herself before it ever touched him. She's giving him choices, Dr. Bennett observed, watching Sophie present the specially designed saddle pad to Phantom. Every step of the way, she's letting him choose to participate. The breakthrough came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Sophie had been working with Phantom near the mounting ramp, a modified structure designed to accommodate her wheelchair at the perfect height for transfer to horseback. For days they'd simply spent time there, with Sophie playing music while Phantom grew accustomed to the new addition to his environment. This time, however, Sophie had come prepared. She wore the new safety vest underneath her jacket, and the specialized saddle was ready nearby. Her tablet spoke to the small group of trusted observers. Today, we try. David stepped forward, concern etched on his face. Sophie, are you sure? We haven't tested the emergency release system in a real-world situation yet. Her response was characteristically determined. Sometimes you have to trust before you're ready. That's what he did for me. The process of tacking up Phantom was a dance in itself. Sophie guided each movement through musical cues, turning what could have been a stressful experience into something almost ceremonial. The stallion stood perfectly still, his eyes half closed in contentment as the special saddle was carefully secured. This is the moment of truth, Dr. Wilson murmured, video camera in hand to document the equipment's first real test. Everything we've designed comes down to this. Sophie positioned her wheelchair at the top of the ramp, her keyboard secure on its tray. She played a soft, familiar melody, the same piece she'd composed during the storm, as she began the complex process of transfer. Phantom, who had been trained over the past days to align himself perfectly with the ramp, stood rock steady. The whole stable seemed to hold its breath as Sophie, with minimal assistance from David, executed the transfer she'd practiced countless times on the mechanical horse in Dr. Wilson's lab. Her upper body strength, developed through years of wheelchair use, served her well as she moved with practiced precision. Then, for the first time in 2 years, Sophie Chen sat tall in a saddle. Phantom turned his head to look at her, his eyes soft and questioning. She leaned forward slightly, one hand resting on his neck, the other reaching for her tablet. Thank you for trusting me, beautiful boy. Now, let's show them what trust can do. No one present that day would ever forget the sight. The girl who couldn't speak and the horse no one could tame, finding in each other the courage to defy everyone's expectations. But this was just the beginning of their journey. The real test would come at the Fall Festival, now just days away. The days leading up to the Fall Festival became a whirlwind of activity at Westbrook Stables. Sophie and Phantom's practice sessions grew longer and more complex as they developed their unique form of communication. Instead of traditional riding cues, Sophie had created a combination of musical signals and light touch commands that allowed her to guide Phantom without the use of her legs. "It's like watching a dance," Amy commented one morning, capturing their practice session through her camera lens. Phantom moved with fluid grace around the arena, responding to Sophie's subtle signals and the musical cues playing through carefully positioned speakers. They had progressed from simple walking to smooth transitions between gaits, each movement flowing naturally into the next. Dr. Wilson returned frequently to make adjustments to the specialized equipment, amazed by how quickly both rider and horse were adapting to the system. "What you're doing here," he told Sophie, "is revolutionizing adaptive riding. Every limitation we thought existed, you're proving it wrong." But 3 days before the festival, they faced their first major setback. During a particularly complex sequence, one of the saddle's stabilizing straps malfunctioned. Sophie remained secure thanks to the backup systems, but the incident spooked Phantom. The stallion, sensing something wrong, became agitated and nearly bolted. David was ready to call off their festival performance, but Sophie remained calm. Her tablet spoke as she stroked Phantom's neck. "He didn't bolt. He could have. But he chose to trust me instead. We need to trust him too." That evening, as David helped Sophie dismount, she revealed another surprise. Her fingers moved across her tablet with excitement. "I've been working on something special for the festival. Not just riding, I want to tell our story." She showed them her plan, a choreographed performance set to an original musical piece she had been composing, combining elements of classical music with contemporary rhythms. The composition told their journey, from trauma and isolation to trust and partnership, without need for words. "But that's not all," her tablet continued. "I want to demonstrate the release sequence." Everyone present stiffened. The emergency release system, designed to free Sophie from the saddle in seconds if necessary, was their safety backup, not something meant for public demonstration. "Absolutely not," David started, but Sophie was already typing. "People need to see that taking risks doesn't mean being reckless. They need to understand that trust and safety can coexist. Phantom and we represent everyone who's ever been told they're too broken or too dangerous to succeed." Lisa, who had been quiet during the exchange, spoke up. "She's right, David. Their story is about more than just a girl and a horse. It's about changing how people see limitations." The next 2 days were spent perfecting every detail of their performance. Sophie worked with the festival's sound technicians to ensure her music would play clearly through the arena's speaker system. Dr. Wilson made final adjustments to the equipment, and David coordinated with emergency services to have them on standby, just in case. The evening before the festival, an unexpected visitor arrived at the stables. Chen, Sophie's aunt, pulled up in her nursing scrubs, having come directly from her shift. She carried a small wooden box that made Sophie's eyes widen in recognition. "Your mother wanted you to have this when you were ready," Mai said softly, opening the box to reveal a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a phoenix. "She always said you had its spirit, the ability to rise from ashes, stronger than before." As Mai fastened the pendant around her niece's neck, Sophie's fingers trembled slightly on her tablet. "Will you help me braid it into Phantom's mane tomorrow, so we both carry that spirit?" The night before their performance, Sophie stayed late at the stables. David found her in Phantom's paddock, the stallion ground-tied beside her wheelchair as she played through their performance piece one final time. The music carried on the evening breeze, a melody that spoke of loss and fear, building gradually into something powerful and triumphant. "Your parents would be so proud of you," David said softly as the last notes faded. "Not just for, what you've accomplished, but for who you've become." Sophie's response was thoughtful. "Tomorrow isn't about proving anything to anyone else. It's about showing others like us that their stories don't end at broken or dangerous." As they prepared to leave, Phantom did something unprecedented. He followed Sophie to the paddock gate without any prompting, then lowered his head to gently touch his muzzle to her heart, where the phoenix pendant rested. "I think," Lisa observed, wiping tears from her eyes, "he's trying to tell you he's ready." That night, As Cedar Grove prepared for the biggest fall festival in its history, no one could have predicted how Sophie and Phantom's performance would touch hearts far beyond their small Virginia town. Their story of trust, transformation, and unconditional acceptance was about to challenge everything people thought they knew about limitations, healing, and the extraordinary bonds between humans and horses. The morning of the fall festival dawned clear and crisp, painting Cedar Grove in vibrant autumn colors. By 8 a.m., the parking lot at Westbrook Stables was already filling with vehicles, including 3 local news vans and a crew from a major equestrian magazine. The story of the silent girl and the wild stallion had captured imaginations far beyond their small town. Inside Phantom's stall, Sophie sat in her wheelchair, methodically braiding her mother's phoenix pendant into his mane. The stallion stood, perfectly still, occasionally turning his head to watch her work with soft, attentive eyes. Aunt Mai helped with the intricate braiding while telling stories about Sophie's mother. "She was just like you know," Mai said softly, weaving white ribbons through Phantom's black mane. "Always seeing the beauty in broken things, always believing in possibilities others missed." David appeared at the stall door, his face tight with concern. "Sophie, honey, the crowd. It's bigger than we expected, much bigger. Are you sure?" Sophie's tablet interrupted. As Sophie and Phantom made their victory lap around the arena, something unprecedented occurred. Instead of heading toward the exit, Phantom suddenly stopped near a young girl in a wheelchair who sat watching from the front row. The girl's mother tried to wheel her back, afraid of the massive stallion, but Sophie raised her hand in a gentle gesture of reassurance. Her tablet spoke over the arena's sound system. "Sometimes, the biggest hearts hide behind the scariest facades." She gestured for the girl to reach out her hand. 9-year-old Emily Torres, who had been paralyzed in a car accident 6 months earlier, stretched her trembling fingers toward Phantom. The stallion, who once would have shied away from any stranger's touch, lowered his head with extraordinary gentleness and pressed his velvet muzzle into her palm. The moment was captured by dozens of cameras and would become the cover photo for several major magazines. But more importantly, it sparked something in Emily, a spark that would soon ignite into flame. Within days of the festival, Westbrook Stables was flooded with inquiries. Parents of children with disabilities, veterans with PTSD, trauma survivors, all wanted to know more about Sophie's methods. Dr. Wilson's adaptive riding equipment designs were suddenly in high demand, and he began working on ways to make the technology more accessible and affordable. 1 week after the festival, Sophie sat in David's office, surrounded by stacks of letters and emails. Her tablet spoke as she showed him a particularly moving message. "They're not just asking about riding, they're asking about hope." David, who had been fielding calls all week from major equestrian organizations, nodded thoughtfully. "What are you thinking?" Sophie's response was immediate and clear. "We need to expand the program. Not just therapeutic riding, but trust-based healing for both horses and humans." The idea took root quickly. With support from several major donors who had witnessed their festival performance, Westbrook Stables began its transformation. The therapeutic riding program expanded, with Sophie and Phantom at its heart. But they didn't stop there. They began taking in problem horses, animals that, like Phantom, had been deemed too dangerous or damaged for traditional training methods. Sophie worked with each one, using her unique combination of music therapy and patient understanding to help them heal. Emily Torres became their first new student, working with both Sophie and Phantom to rebuild her confidence after her accident. The sight of her tentative smile the first time Phantom carried her around the arena brought tears to everyone's eyes. Her mother later told reporters, "Sophie didn't just teach Emily to ride, she taught her to live again." The media attention brought unexpected opportunities. A leading university's veterinary psychology department partnered with them to study the impact of music therapy on traumatized horses. Dr. Bennett collaborated with them to develop new protocols for handling dangerous horses, emphasizing understanding over dominance. One crisp autumn morning, about a month after the festival, Sophie sat in her wheelchair beside Phantom's paddock, reading through new student applications. The The stallion dozed beside her, his head lowered to her level, completely at peace. David found them there, marveling at how far they'd come. "Remember when everyone said he'd kill you?" he asked, settling onto a nearby bench. Sophie's tablet spoke with a hint of amusement. "People see what they expect to see. We taught them to look deeper." A commotion at the stable entrance drew their attention. Lisa was leading in a new arrival, a fierce-looking chestnut mare with wild eyes and a reputation for attacking handlers. 3 different stables had already given up on her. "They say she's impossible," Lisa called out. "Reminds me of someone we know." Sophie's response was immediate. "Nothing is impossible. Some things just need a different approach." She was already reaching for her keyboard as Phantom lifted his head with interest, seeming to understand that another lost soul needed their help. That evening, as the sun set over Cedar Grove, David watched Sophie playing her keyboard near the chestnut mare's stall. Phantom stood protectively nearby as the first notes of a new composition filled the air. The mare's frantic pacing gradually slowed as she listened, her ears swiveling toward the music. "You know," Lisa said, joining him by the barn door, "when you first took Sophie in after the accident, everyone said you were crazy, that you couldn't help her." David smiled, watching as the chestnut mare cautiously approached the stall door, drawn by Sophie's music just as Phantom had been. "Sometimes, the biggest miracles come from believing in the impossible." In the growing dusk, Sophie's music wove a spell of hope and healing, not just for the frightened mare, but for everyone who had ever been told they were too broken to be fixed, too dangerous to be trusted, or too different to succeed. Her story with Phantom had become more than just a tale of a girl and her horse. It had become a beacon of possibility for others searching for their own path to healing. As night fell over Westbrook Stables, the soft notes of Sophie's keyboard carried on the evening breeze, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that speak without words, and the strongest connections are forged in the space between fear and trust. Winter descended on Cedar Grove, transforming Westbrook Stables into a wonderland of frost and snow. 6 months had passed since Sophie and Phantom's breakthrough performance, and the changes they'd inspired continued to multiply like ripples in a pond. The stable had expanded to include a new indoor arena specifically designed for their innovative therapy program, funded by a grant from the National Equestrian Rehabilitation Foundation. The chestnut mare, now named Phoenix in honor of Sophie's pendant, had become their latest success story. Under Sophie's patient guidance, she had transformed from a dangerous outcast into a gentle therapy horse, particularly skilled at working with veterans suffering from PTSD. The sight of her carefully carrying a former Marine through his first riding session brought tears to even the toughest stable hand's eyes. One snowy December morning, Dr. Wilson arrived with exciting news. He'd been developing a new version of Sophie's adaptive riding equipment that would be more affordable and accessible to others with similar needs. "The preliminary trials have been incredible," he explained, spreading the designs across David's desk. "We're calling it the Chen Phantom Protocol, if that's okay with you, Sophie." Sophie's tablet spoke as she studied the drawings. "As long as it helps others fly, like we do." Phantom, who now followed her everywhere like a massive shadow, nickered softly in agreement. The stable's success had drawn attention from unexpected quarters. A prestigious European equestrian center had sent representatives to study their methods, and a documentary crew was in the midst of filming a feature about their program. But perhaps the most meaningful validation came from the very authorities who had once wanted to euthanize Phantom. The town council, which had previously deemed him too dangerous to rehabilitate, unanimously voted to provide funding for a new, second chance program at Westbrook. The initiative would focus on rehabilitating horses that other facilities had given up on, using Sophie's music-based methodology. Emily Torres, their first student after the festival, had progressed remarkably. Now able to ride independently using modified equipment, she had become an ambassador for their program, speaking at schools about the power of perseverance. Her mother often found her in Phantom's paddock, playing her own keyboard under Sophie's guidance, working with newer therapy horses. "You've created something extraordinary here," Lisa remarked one evening, watching Sophie work with a new arrival, a blind Appaloosa gelding that other stables had deemed unrideable. The horse followed the sound of Sophie's music with remarkable precision, learning to navigate using audio cues instead of sight. Sophie's response was thoughtful. "We didn't create it. We just showed people what was possible when you stop seeing limitations and start seeing opportunities." The winter evening program had become a stable favorite. Sophie and Phantom would perform under the lights of the indoor arena, their routine evolving to include ever more complex movements. The bond between them had deepened to an almost mystical level, Phantom often anticipating Sophie's cues before she gave them. During one such evening, a surprise visitor arrived at Westbrook. Dr. Sarah Bennett, who had first suggested having Phantom put down, stood watching their performance with tears in her eyes. "I was so wrong," she admitted to David. "What they've achieved. It's revolutionizing how we think about both human and equine therapy." The most touching moments, however, often came during the quiet times. Like the morning when a nonverbal autistic child, who had never shown interest in connecting with others, spontaneously reached out to touch Phantom's nose. Or the afternoon when a stroke survivor spoke his first words in months, while sitting beside Sophie as she played her keyboard. Aunt Mai, who had watched her niece's journey from silent grief to powerful healing force, often found herself sharing stories with new parents who brought their children to the stable. "Sophie taught us all," she would say, "that silence doesn't mean absence of voice. Sometimes the most powerful messages don't need words at all." The stable's Christmas celebration that year was particularly meaningful. Students, parents, veterans, and horses gathered in the decorated indoor arena for a special evening performance. Sophie and Phantom's entrance drew gasps of wonder. The stallion's mane braided with tiny lights that matched the glow of Sophie's phoenix pendant. Their music that night told a story of transformation, from darkness to light, from fear to trust, from isolation to connection. As the final notes faded away, David noticed something remarkable. Every therapy horse in the stable, from Phoenix to the blind Appaloosa, had their ears pricked forward, listening intently to Sophie's melody. "It's like they're all speaking the same language now," Amy observed, capturing the moment with her camera. Her photographs of Westbrook's journey had recently won several awards and were being featured in a traveling exhibition about adaptive sports. As snow fell softly outside, Sophie sat in her wheelchair beside Phantom, her hand resting on his neck. Her tablet spoke to the gathered crowd. "Everyone told us what was impossible, but Phantom and I knew better. Because sometimes the things people call impossible are just waiting for someone to believe they're possible." The success of Westbrook's program had begun attracting attention from medical researchers interested in studying the intersection of music therapy, equine connection, and human healing. But for Sophie, the real miracle wasn't in the scientific validation or growing recognition. It was in the daily moments of breakthrough, when another lost soul found their way home through the power of trust and understanding. 1 year after Sophie and Phantom's legendary Fall Festival performance, Westbrook Stables hosted a special anniversary celebration. The event drew visitors from across the country, families seeking hope, professionals studying their methods, and media documenting their continuing impact on the world of therapeutic riding. The stable had grown exponentially, now featuring 3 indoor arenas and a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center. The Chen Phantom protocol had been implemented in therapeutic riding centers across 3 continents, and their music-based training method had become the subject of several scientific studies on equine behavior and trauma recovery. On the earthy morning of the celebration, Sophie sat in her wheelchair beside Phantom's paddock, reading a letter that had brought tears to her eyes. Her tablet spoke as she showed it to David. "They want to nominate us for the International Therapeutic Riding Innovation Award." But it wasn't the recognition that moved her most. It was the photograph enclosed with the letter. It showed a young girl in Kazakhstan using their methods to work with a previously unrideable horse. The girl was using a keyboard identical to Sophie's, and around her neck gleamed a replica of the phoenix pendant that had become the symbol of their program. The anniversary celebration began with a special performance. Sophie and Phantom entered the main arena to thunderous applause, but they weren't alone. Behind them came Emily Torres, riding Phoenix, and 6 other pairs of riders and horses, each with their own story of transformation. The arena fell silent as Sophie's new composition filled the air. The piece began with a single piano note, representing loneliness and isolation. Gradually, other instruments joined in, each rider and horse moving in perfect harmony to their part of the melody. The performance told their collective story, how trust could bridge any gap, how music could heal the deepest wounds, and how love could transform the impossible into possible. Dr. Wilson, watching from the sidelines, wiped tears from his eyes. As he explained to a documentary crew, "What you're seeing isn't just choreography, it's a new language of healing. Each of these riders was told they couldn't. Each of these horses was deemed dangerous or worthless. Together, they're showing us what courage really looks like." The highlight of the celebration came when Sophie unveiled their newest initiative, the Westbrook Scholarship Program. Funded by private donors and corporate sponsors, it would provide full access to their therapy program for families who couldn't afford it. "No one should be denied the chance to heal," her tablet announced to the crowd. That evening, as the celebration continued, David found Sophie in her favorite spot, playing her keyboard under the stars while Phantom dozed beside her wheelchair. The stallion's coat gleamed in the moonlight, his muscled frame relaxed and peaceful. It was hard to remember he was once considered so dangerous that authorities wanted him put down. "Your parents would be so proud," David said softly, settling onto a nearby bench. "You've changed so many lives." Sophie's response was characteristically humble. "Phantom changed them. I just showed people how to listen." As if hearing his name, Phantom lifted his head and gently nuzzled Sophie's shoulder. The gesture, once feared impossible from such a dangerous horse, had become his signature display of affection. The phoenix pendant at Sophie's throat caught the moonlight, seeming to glow with its own inner fire. A commotion at the stable entrance drew their attention. Lisa was leading in their newest arrival, a severely injured racehorse that 3 veterinarians had recommended euthanizing. The horse's eyes held the same wild fear they'd once seen in Phantom's. Without hesitation, Sophie's fingers found the keys of her keyboard. The first notes of a gentle melody floated through the night air. The injured horse's ears pricked forward, its frantic movements calming as the music worked its magic. "Some people still think what we do is impossible," Lisa remarked, watching the transformation begin. Sophie's tablet spoke with quiet conviction. "Nothing is impossible. Some things just need a different kind of courage, the courage to trust, to try, and to believe." As the stars wheeled overhead, Sophie continued playing, her music weaving a spell of hope and healing. Phantom stood protectively beside her wheelchair, his own journey from feared outcast to trusted partner, a testament to the power of understanding and patience. The story of the silent girl and the wild stallion had become more than just an inspiring tale. It had grown into a movement, changing how the world viewed both human and equine potential. Their legacy lived on in every rider who found their voice through connection, every horse who learned to trust again, and every heart that dared to believe in impossible dreams. "You know what I've learned?" Sophie's tablet spoke as she finished her song. "Sometimes the biggest miracles come from the smallest moments of trust. One girl, one horse, one note at a time. That's how we change the world." Above them, a shooting star streaked across the night sky, as if nature itself was adding a final flourish to their story. But in truth, it wasn't an ending at all. It was just another beginning. For wherever there were souls in need of healing, the music of hope that had started with a girl and her wild horse would continue to play, reminding the world that the most powerful voices are sometimes the ones that speak without words. 5 years after Sophie and Phantom first made headlines, their impact continued to ripple across the world in ways no one could have predicted. Westbrook Stables had grown from a small local riding center into an internationally recognized healing facility, with sister locations opening across 3 continents. The impossible partnership between a silent girl in a wheelchair and a supposedly dangerous stallion had sparked a revolution in therapeutic riding and trauma recovery. On a bright spring morning, Sophie sat in her customized wheelchair, watching as a group of international students practiced her music-based training methods in the main arena. Her tablet spoke to the visiting journalist from National Geographic. Every story of healing starts with someone willing to listen beyond words. Phantom, now a distinguished 15 years old, stood beside her with the same protective attention he'd shown since their first connection. His black coat had a few silver strands now, but his eyes remained bright and alert. Together, they had helped rehabilitate over 200 dangerous horses and worked with more than 1,000 riders with various challenges. Emily Torres, now 14, had become their youngest certified instructor. The girl who once feared she'd never ride again was currently leading a session with a group of young veterans dealing with PTSD. Her voice, strong and confident, guided them through the musical exercises that had become the foundation of their therapy program. The music speaks to their trauma in ways traditional therapy can't reach, Dr. Bennett explained to the journalist. She had become the program's lead researcher, documenting the neurological impacts of their methods. When words fail, rhythm and melody create a bridge between fear and trust. The Chen Phantom protocol had evolved into a comprehensive healing system, combining adaptive riding technology, music therapy, and trauma-informed care. Medical journals had published studies showing remarkable success rates in treating various forms of trauma, both human and equine. But the numbers only told part of the story. In the rehabilitation barn, Phoenix, the once aggressive chestnut mare, was helping a young girl find her courage again after a serious riding accident. The girl's mother watched through tears as her daughter, who had sworn never to touch a horse again, gently stroked Phoenix's nose while Sophie played a soft melody nearby. It's not just about riding anymore, David reflected, watching the scene. Now the director of international development for their program, he had overseen the opening of healing centers in 12 countries. It's about showing people that their limitations are often just the beginning of their possibilities. The stable yard bustled with activity as preparations continued for their annual Hope and Harmony Festival. What had started as a small local event had grown into a global gathering of therapeutic riding practitioners, researchers, and families seeking healing. This year's festival would feature demonstrations by teams from Japan, Brazil, and Norway, all using variations of Sophie's methods. Lisa, who now headed their trainer certification program, was reviewing applications from the latest group of candidates. "We have people coming from every background imaginable," she told the journalist. "Doctors, therapists, musicians, all drawn to this new way of healing." In the afternoon, Sophie and Phantom gave a demonstration for a group of medical students, studying the therapeutic applications of their work. Their bond had deepened over the years into something almost telepathic. Phantom responded to the subtlest changes in Sophie's music, their movements so perfectly synchronized that it seemed impossible to tell who was leading whom. The Phoenix pendant, now accompanied by a small collection of international awards and honors, still gleamed at Sophie's throat. It had become the symbol of their program, representing the power of rising from adversity stronger than before. Replicas of it were worn by instructors and students at every Westbrook-affiliated center worldwide. As sunset approached, a special ceremony honored the latest graduates of their instructor training program. Among them was Marcus Chen, Sophie's young cousin, who had been inspired by her story to pursue a career in therapeutic riding after losing his leg in a motorcycle accident. His graduation piece, performed with one of their rehabilitated horses, moved many to tears. "The real miracle," Sophie's tablet spoke during the ceremony, "isn't in the riding or even in the music. It's in the moments when someone realizes their story doesn't end at broken or impossible. Every person who finds their strength here becomes a light for someone else still searching in the dark." Later that evening, as stars began to appear over Cedar Grove, Sophie played a new composition she'd been working on. Phantom stood beside her wheelchair, his head lowered to her level, both of them silhouetted against the twilight sky. The melody spoke of their journey, not just of what they'd overcome, but of all the lives they'd touched along the way. A young girl in a wheelchair watching from nearby asked Sophie through her own tablet, "Did you ever imagine it would become this big?" Sophie's response captured the essence of their entire journey. Dreams don't have size limits. They just need hearts brave enough to believe in them and the patience to let them grow. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of trust. like a girl who couldn't speak and a horse no one would listen to, finding their voice together. As night fell over Westbrook Stables, the soft notes of Sophie's keyboard carried on the breeze, blending with the peaceful sounds of horses and the quiet conversation of people finding their way back to hope. Their story had become more than just an inspiration. It had become a beacon, guiding others toward their own possibilities of healing and transformation. 10 years after their first breakthrough, Sophie and Phantom's legacy had transformed into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The United Nations had just recognized their program as a pioneering force in global therapeutic rehabilitation, and medical schools worldwide were incorporating the Chen Phantom protocol into their therapeutic practice curricula. On a crispy, autumn morning, much like the one when their story began, Sophie wheeled herself into the special memorial garden that had been created at Westbrook's heart. Now 26, she had grown into a poised young woman, her quiet strength touching lives across the globe. Phantom, his muzzle now graced with distinguished gray, followed with the same devoted attention he'd shown for the past decade. The garden celebrated the hundreds of success stories that had blossomed from their partnership. Bronze plaques lined the winding paths, each telling a story of transformation. There was Juan, a Venezuelan boy told he'd never walk again, now leading riding clinics in South America. Sarah, an Australian veteran with severe PTSD, who had gone on to establish 3 healing centers in her country, and countless others, each finding their own path to healing through the magic of music and horse connection. "Did you ever think our impossible dream would touch so many lives?" David asked, joining her by the central fountain. Now in his 70s, he had officially retired but remained the heart and soul of Westbrook's mission. Sophie's tablet spoke with the same quiet wisdom that had characterized her journey. "Dreams are like music. They have no boundaries. They speak every language and heal every heart that's willing to listen." The morning's excitement centered around their newest initiative, the Global Healing Harmony Project. Representatives from 30 countries had gathered to launch a worldwide network of therapeutic centers, all built on Sophie and Phantom's groundbreaking methods. The project would make their healing program accessible to communities that had never dreamed of such possibilities. In the main arena, Emily Torres, now a renowned equine therapist, was demonstrating their latest innovation, a virtual reality system that allowed bedridden patients to experience the therapeutic benefits of horse connection. The technology, developed in collaboration with leading medical researchers, incorporated Sophie's musical methods with cutting-edge rehabilitation science. "The amazing thing," Dr. Wilson explained to the gathered delegates, "is how the original principles Sophie and Phantom discovered still form the foundation of every advancement we make. Trust, patience, and the healing power of musical connection. These transcend all barriers." Phoenix, the once aggressive mare who had become their first success story after Phantom, now served as the program's ambassador for rehabilitating troubled horses. At 20 years old, she had helped gentle over 100 dangerous horses, proving that Sophie and Phantom's miracle could be replicated again and again. The afternoon brought a special ceremony that touched everyone's hearts. A group of children from the Make-A-Wish Foundation had come to meet Sophie and Phantom. Among them was a young girl named Maria, who bore in striking resemblance to Sophie. At 16, silent, wheelchair-bound, and carrying deep trauma in her eyes. As Sophie began to play her keyboard, Phantom did something remarkable. Without any prompting, he walked to Maria and lowered his head to her level, offering the same gentle connection he had first shown Sophie a decade ago. The girl's face transformed, with the first smile her parents had seen in months. "That's the real magic," Lisa observed, wiping tears from her eyes. "It's like they can sense who needs them most." The day's events culminated in a global video conference linking all the Westbrook-affiliated centers worldwide. On screens around the arena, faces from every continent shared stories of how Sophie and Phantom's methods had transformed their communities. A young instructor in Kenya described using their music therapy to help children affected by war. A team in Japan showed how they'd adapted the techniques for earthquake trauma survivors. As evening approached, Sophie and Phantom gave one final demonstration. Their bond had deepened into something almost mystical over the years. The music that flowed from Sophie's fingers told their story, not just of their personal journey, but of every life they'd touched along the way. The real miracle, Sophie's tablet spoke to the gathered crowd, isn't what Phantom and I achieved. It's what each of you achieves every day, believing in possibilities when others see only limitations. Later, as stars appeared over Cedar Grove, Sophie sat in the memorial garden with Phantom dozing beside her wheelchair. Her fingers traced the words engraved on the central plaque. When trust replaces fear, anything is possible. A soft nicker drew their attention. In the nearby paddock, Maria was sitting with one of their newest rescues, a traumatized stallion others had given up on. Her hands moved tentatively over a keyboard as Sophie had taught her, and the horse's tense posture was beginning to soften. "And so it begins again," David said softly, watching the scene. Sophie's tablet spoke her final thoughts of the day. Every ending is just another beginning. As long as there are hearts willing to trust and souls needing to heal, our music will keep playing. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the darkening sky, as if nature itself was celebrating the endless possibilities that arise when one person dares to believe in the impossible. The legacy of the silent girl and the wild stallion continued to grow, proving that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that speak through love, trust, and the universal language of healing. 15 years after their story began, Westbrook Stables prepared to host its most ambitious event yet, the first Global Healing Heart Symposium. The event would bring together medical professionals, therapeutic riding experts, and success stories from every corner of the world. But more importantly, it would mark a profound milestone in Sophie and Phantom's journey. The morning dawned with a special ceremony in the memorial garden, now twice its original size and filled with blooming cherry blossoms, a gift from their Japanese partner center. Sophie, elegant at 31, sat in her latest generation, adaptive wheelchair, designed by a team of engineers inspired by her story. Phantom, now showing his age but still regal, stood faithfully by her side. Today, her tablet spoke to the gathered crowd. We celebrate not just what was, but what will be. The announcement that followed brought tears to many eyes. The launch of the Phantom Legacy Foundation, dedicated to ensuring their methods would continue changing lives long into the future. Dr. Wilson, now leading the research division, unveiled the latest statistics. Over 10,000 riders helped, more than 500 dangerous horses rehabilitated, and therapeutic centers in 47 countries. But the numbers told only part of the story. The real impact could be seen in the faces of those gathered for the symposium. There was Michael, a former soldier who had lost both legs in combat, now running the veterans program at their Australian center. Besides him sat Yuki, a non-verbal Japanese girl who had found her voice through music and horses, now a promising young instructor. Each person carried a piece of Sophie and Phantom's legacy in their own unique way. The morning's keynote presentation featured groundbreaking research from a team of neuroscientists who had studied the brain patterns of both horses and humans during music therapy sessions. Their findings validated what Sophie had instinctively discovered years ago, the profound connection between music, motion, and healing. What Sophie and Phantom pioneered, the lead researcher explained, wasn't just a training method. They discovered a fundamental truth about the way trauma heals and trust rebuilds. The implications for both human and animal rehabilitation are still unfolding. In the main arena, a special demonstration brought their journey full circle. Emily Torres, now a renowned therapist, worked with a group of children using the latest evolution of Sophie's methods. The sight of young riders, each facing their own challenges, moving in harmony with their horses to the music of healing, brought David to tears. "Remember when they said Phantom would kill you?" he asked Sophie during a quiet moment. "Now look at how many lives you've saved together." Sophie's response was characteristic of her wisdom. Sometimes, the things people fear most become the very things that heal them. Phantom taught us that. Every scared heart has the potential to become a healing one. The afternoon sessions showcased innovations that had grown from their work. Virtual reality programs helped bedridden patients experience the benefits of horse connection. Mobile units brought their therapy to remote communities, A new app, developed by a tech team inspired by their story, helped connect struggling riders and horses worldwide. But perhaps the most touching moment came during the evening gala. Maria, the young girl they'd met 5 years ago, performed a musical demonstration with the once traumatized stallion she'd helped heal. Their performance, set to a piece she'd composed herself, embodied everything Sophie and Phantom had taught: trust, patience, and the power of unconditional acceptance. As night fell, a special honor was bestowed upon them. The World Health Organization officially recognized the Chen Phantom Protocol as a groundbreaking advancement in trauma therapy. The announcement came with funding to establish training centers in developing nations, ensuring their methods would reach those who needed them most. In a quiet moment between celebrations, Sophie sat with Phantom in their favorite spot by the memorial garden. Her fingers moved across her keyboard, playing the melody that had first connected them 15 years ago. Though older now, Phantom's response was as immediate as ever, his head lowering to her shoulder in their familiar gesture of trust. A group of new students watched from nearby, among them a young boy recently paralyzed in an accident. His mother had brought him across 3 continents, hoping to find the same miracle that had transformed Sophie's life. Seeing his uncertain expression, Sophie typed a message that appeared on the garden's digital display board. The biggest changes often start with the smallest moments of trust. 15 years ago, I was a girl who couldn't speak, sitting before a horse everyone feared. We had nothing but music and hope, but sometimes, that's all you need. The courage to believe and the patience to let healing happen in its own time. As the stars emerged above Cedar Grove, the soft notes of Sophie's keyboard floated on the evening breeze. Around the world, in hundreds of centers bearing their legacy, other musicians played similar melodies, creating a global symphony of healing. The story of the silent girl and the wild stallion had become more than an inspiration. It had become a movement, a methodology, and a testament to the limitless possibilities that arise when fear gives way to trust. The phoenix pendant at Sophie's throat caught the moonlight, its gleam matched by the silver in Phantom's mane, both of them transformed by time but unchanged in their core purpose, to show the world that sometimes the most profound healing comes from the most unlikely partnerships. 20 years had passed since a silent girl and a dangerous stallion first changed the world's understanding of healing. On a golden autumn morning, remarkably similar to the day their story began, Westbrook Stables prepared for a bittersweet celebration. Phantom, now in his twilight years at 25, was officially retiring from public demonstrations. Sophie, who had grown into a pioneering force in therapeutic rehabilitation at 36, sat in her state-of-the-art wheelchair beside her lifelong partner. Her fingers moved across her latest generation communication device, more sophisticated than the tablet she'd started with but still carrying the same profound wisdom. Some partnerships transcend time. They become legends that light the way for others. The retirement ceremony had drawn thousands from around the world, including many whose lives had been transformed by their legacy. The main arena, now a world-class facility, was filled to capacity. Screens had been set up around the property to accommodate the overflow crowd, and centers across the globe were streaming the event live. Emily Torres, now the executive director of international operations, opened the ceremony with a moving speech. 20 years ago, everyone said this horse would kill the girl in the wheelchair. Instead, they created a revolution in healing that has touched millions of lives. Today, we don't just honor their past, we celebrate how their vision continues to shape the future. The ceremony featured a retrospective of their journey, projected on massive screens. Images flashed across them. Their first tentative connection through music, the groundbreaking Fall Festival performance, the establishment of their first international centers, and countless moments of healing they'd inspired around the world. Dr. Wilson, now in his 80s but still passionate about their work, presented the latest statistics. Over 50,000 riders helped directly, more than 2,000 dangerous horses rehabilitated, and therapeutic centers in 78 countries. The Chen Phantom Protocol had become the gold standard in equine-assisted therapy, taught in medical schools and rehabilitation centers worldwide. But the most touching moments came from the personal testimonials. Maria, now an accomplished therapist, herself spoke about how Sophie and Phantom had saved her life when she was a traumatized teenager. Michael, the veteran who'd lost his legs, shared how their methods had given him purpose again. Yuki, once nonverbal like Sophie, sang a beautiful tribute in Japanese, demonstrating how completely their work had transformed her life. For their final public demonstration, Sophie and Phantom performed the piece that had first connected them 2 decades ago. Though Phantom's movements were slower now, his connection with Sophie remained as powerful as ever. The music they created together spoke of trust, healing, and the timeless bond between 2 souls who had defied all expectations. "Watch closely," David whispered to the young riders gathered nearby. Now in his 80s, he remained the heart of Westbrook's mission. "You're witnessing something that comes once in a lifetime, a partnership that changed not just lives, but the very way we understand healing." After the demonstration, Sophie made an announcement that brought both tears and hope to the gathered crowd. The Phantom Legacy Foundation was establishing a new initiative: fully funded therapeutic riding centers in conflict zones and disaster areas worldwide. The first centers would open in refugee camps, bringing their methods of healing to those who needed it most. Phantom taught us that the most feared hearts often have the greatest capacity for healing. Sophie's device spoke to the crowd. Now it's our turn to take that lesson where it's needed most, to places where trauma and fear seem insurmountable. The day's events concluded with a touching ceremony in the memorial garden. Each of the cherry trees, now fully grown, bore plaques honoring different aspects of their legacy. A new statue was unveiled at the garden center, a bronze rendering of Sophie and Phantom as they were 20 years ago, capturing the moment they first connected through music. As evening fell, Sophie and Phantom retired to their special spot by the garden. Though he would no longer perform publicly, Phantom would continue to live out his days at Westbrook, helping to train new therapy horses and inspiring visitors with his gentle presence. His paddock, designed for his comfort in his senior years, overlooked the training areas where new generations of horses and riders were discovering their own paths to healing. "Some people still ask me what our secret was." Sophie's device spoke to a small group of new instructors gathered for their final lesson of the day. "They want to know how a silent girl and a dangerous horse could create something that changed the world. The truth is, there was no secret. There was only trust, patience, and the courage to believe that love speaks louder than fear." As stars began to appear above Cedar Grove, Sophie played one last melody for the day. Phantom stood beside her, wheelchair, his once black coat now heavily dappled with gray, but his eyes still bright with the same spirit that had captured hearts around the world. Together, they had proven that sometimes the most profound revolutions start with the simplest acts of trust. The phoenix pendant at Sophie's throat caught the last rays of sunlight, its gleam matching the wisdom in both their eyes. They had risen from their own ashes to help countless others rise from theirs, creating a legacy that would continue touching lives long after their own story became legend. 25 years after their story began, Westbrook Stables prepared for its most poignant moment yet. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds as Sophie made her way to Phantom's paddock. At 41, she had become a beacon of hope for millions, while Phantom, now 30, had lived far beyond the typical lifespan of his breed. As if determined to complete their mission together, the stable had grown into a global center for healing, with buildings spanning the entire valley. The original paddock where their story began remained unchanged, preserved as a reminder of how the impossible became possible. Today, it would witness another transformation. Sophie found David already at the paddock, his wheelchair positioned beside Phantom's favorite spot. At 85, he had finally retired from active management, but his presence remained essential to Westbrook's spirit. "He was waiting for you," David said softly, indicating Phantom, who stood alert despite his advanced age. The news had spread quickly through the therapeutic riding community. Phantom had begun to show signs that his extraordinary journey was nearing its end. Centers around the world had spent the past week sending tributes and sharing stories of how the legendary stallion had inspired their own programs of healing. But today wasn't about sadness. Sophie had arranged something special, a celebration of life that would ensure Phantom's legacy continued in an unexpected way. As if on cue, a truck pulled up to the stable entrance. Inside was a very special cargo, a young black stallion, the spitting image of Phantom in his youth. His grandson, Sophie's device explained to the gathering crowd. Through carefully planned breeding over the years, they had preserved Phantom's bloodline, specifically selecting for the gentleness and intuition that had made him extraordinary. This young horse, named Phoenix, represented the future of their program. The morning ceremony began with a global video conference connecting all 250 Westbrook-affiliated centers worldwide. On screens around the main arena, faces from every continent shared how Sophie and Phantom's methods had transformed their communities. A team in Syria described using their techniques to help children traumatized by war. A center in Haiti showed how they'd adapted the program for earthquake survivors. Emily Torres, now a leading figure in therapeutic writing, internationally, gave a moving speech about the scientific legacy of their work. What started as a girl playing music for a dangerous horse has revolutionized our understanding of trauma, healing, and the human-animal bond, she explained. Their methods have been validated by hundreds of scientific studies and adopted by medical institutions worldwide. But the most touching moment came when Maria, now a mother herself, brought her daughter forward. The girl, born with cerebral palsy, carried the same phoenix pendant that had become their program's symbol. Because of Sophie and Phantom, Maria's voice broke with emotion. My daughter never had to be told what she couldn't do. She only knows what's possible. As the day progressed, Sophie and Phantom gave one final private demonstration for a small group of their closest friends and students. Though his movements were slower now, Phantom's connection with Sophie remained as powerful as ever. The music they created together spoke of a journey that had transformed not just their lives, but the very nature of healing itself. Later, in the Memorial Garden, Sophie unveiled their latest initiative, the Phantom Perpetual Trust. Funded by contributions from grateful students and supporters worldwide, it would ensure that their methods remained accessible to those who needed them most. The trust would provide full scholarships for riders, support for rescue horses, and research grants for advancing their therapeutic techniques. Phantom taught us that healing isn't just about recovering from trauma, Sophie's device spoke to the gathered crowd. It's about discovering the strength we never knew we had. Every scared heart has the potential to become a healing force for others. As sunset approached, something remarkable happened. Young Phoenix, who had been carefully introduced to the stable throughout the day, made his way to Sophie's wheelchair. Without prompting, he lowered his head to her level, the exact same gesture his grandfather had first shown 25 years ago. The moment was captured by dozens of cameras, a torch being passed to a new generation. That evening, as stars appeared above Cedar Grove, Sophie sat with Phantom in their favorite spot. Her fingers moved across her keyboard, playing the melody that had first connected them all those years ago. Around the world, in hundreds of centers bearing their legacy, other musicians played the same tune, creating a global symphony of gratitude. Some people say our story was about proving the impossible possible. Sophie's device spoke softly to those gathered nearby. But it was never about that. It was about showing that when fear gives way to trust, and judgment gives way to understanding, there are no limits to how we can heal each other. The phoenix pendant at Sophie's throat caught the last light of day, its gleam matched by the wisdom in both their eyes. Together, they had risen from their own ashes to help countless others rise from theirs. Though Phantom's physical journey might be nearing its end, their shared legacy would continue touching lives for generations to come. As night fell over Westbrook Stables, the soft notes of Sophie's keyboard floated on the evening breeze, carrying with them 25 years of hope, healing, and the profound truth that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that speak through love. The story of the silent girl and the wild stallion had become more than a legend. It had become a beacon, lighting the way for all those who dared to believe in the transformative power of trust and understanding.